Hey y'all, and welcome to another day of VEDA. Today is April 20th, and it is our Finished Off Fridays, where I will be sharing with you the things that I have finished off. Well, I've only finished off one thing this week, and I'll go ahead and try to wrap up a few of the other things that I have finished off and haven't actually talked to you about. But the thing that I finished off this week, and I'm cut again short for time because it turns out that Zane pooped while he was sleeping and woke himself up, and that of course woke Leo up when I went in to change him, and so yeah, I had to spend a good half an hour of normal sleep time trying to get them to settle back down for nap, since it was only like 20 minutes, half an hour in, and they usually nap for 2 hours, so yeah, they still needed sleep. And so yeah, the thing that I finished this week was I finished my seahorse, and I did get it entered into the decor along. It didn't win anything, which I figured it wouldn't, and it still may not have actually been counted because the deadline was midnight of the 12th, and I guess I thought it was on Friday and not Thursday for the cutoff. And so yeah, I technically had it in at like 12:15. So I don't know if she counted it or not. The thread was locked later, I think that day, or maybe I looked back when I came back from the weekend. So I don't know if it ended up getting anything, but he's not a super big seahorse. I knew he wasn't going to be. I guess since he is a seahorse and most of his body is long and skinny, he does actually seem longer than he is. But he didn't take all that long. Like I said, I had what the head started last week, or did I just have the little feeder mouth thing? I don't know what that's called on a seahorse. I did not put eyes on him, but yeah, his tail does curl up, so yeah, again, harder to measure. But let's see, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-ish. 9.5-ish inches. And my stitching probably is kind of curled up because these things are super hard. The increases and stuff are kind of in a weird layout. So I probably didn't get it actually completely 100% done correctly. And crocheting single crochets in a small circle 4 at a time for some of the smaller sections is definitely not my favorite thing to do. And that was like one of the reasons I wanted to learn knitting, was to do things in the round like that, but I don't even think those would be easier knitting wise either. I think they're just kind of a little annoyance to us all. And that's probably my least favorite thing when doing these stuffy things, is actually trying to make things with those little tiny sections. I'm okay usually even with the 8 stitch sections, but usually once it gets below that, it's just not my favorite thing to do, especially if it's for a long segment. Like this guy's little mouth thing, that was not a fun part to do. And his tail was kind of annoying too, except for it does eventually get to a point where you make a chain and then just make it curl in on itself, and that was okay. But when you get to the tiny part, and then trying to do decreases in that, yeah, not a lot of fun. Oh, and if you are curious, yes, my sound is different today because I discovered that the computer wanted I use a USB cable to charge things, and I have been not using it with my phone because it would not do the data transfer. And then today it decided all of a sudden that when I plug it in, it wants to do the data. So I don't know if that was like a software issue or what the deal was, but now it does want to upload things to the computer. And even though that's not how I'm actually recording this, I am still using the phone. But also, since the last time that I had done that where it actually connected, I didn't have OneDrive, and now I have OneDrive, and so I'm like, hey, I can share my recordings to OneDrive, and get those onto the computer. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing today. I got it transferred to OneDrive and then straight opened up into my editing program, which also was the problem before, is if I connected the phone straight to the computer, it wanted to open up in the recorder software program, and that doesn't work very well on the computer because it is an app. And so this was a much happier solution, and hopefully, if this works out well, we'll be able to continue this at least until my husband actually gets me a working microphone solution, since what I need for the microphone my brother bought me is some kind of adapter, because I think the USB in the actual microphone itself died, which, again, brand new microphone, why are we just not replacing it and having the company take care of it? But anyways, so yeah, he's supposed to get me an adapter so that I can use the other electronic plug end of it that's supposed to go into like an amp or something, so I can actually plug that into my computer. But he hasn't done it yet, and my brother hasn't replaced it. And so, yeah, this was at least better, or hopefully is better, than listening to the popping of my loose wire in my Bluetooth headset. But with this system, I can't just stop and start all the time like I would do with that and hear back. So this is probably going to be a lot longer and a lot more scatterbrained, which by now you guys should be a little more used to. He's from the Craft Fair Cuties collection. I don't know why they're called Craft Fair Cuties, because they're all sea creatures. And when I think of that, I just think of random animals, and this is all sea animals, so I probably called it something different for sea themed. But yeah, he is the Pony of the Sea, but I do not remember the author. I want to say it's something like Sean Torres, but I could be wrong. You'll be able to find a link in the down bar below. But yeah, like I said, he's not a very tall guy. He's only probably 2 inches wide. And again, about 9.5, depends on how curled up his tail is, long. You could probably get him down to 6 inches. I think you were supposed to actually put a string and tie it up so it would be tighter, but I liked his tail loose, so I didn't do that. And, oh, my one complaint is that a lot of stuffy makers don't put in their directions somewhere to place a stitch marker for items that you need to sew on later. And like this guy has his head fin and his back fin. I don't know what else you would call it. Actually, I have a loose string, so let us fix that. I believe I made him with an F hook. I am pretty sure I just used whatever hook the pattern suggested. So I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think I used the E because my E hook is in a different project. The E hook in the sweater? I think my E hook's in my sweater. So there. Sorry. We're right next to the hooks. Might as well tuck in that little loose string. But yeah, so people don't actually tell you where. I would prefer, if you were going to have to sew something on later, to place a stitch marker that you could just leave there. So you know exactly which row it should be in, because even I don't need it to be placed like every row in a line where it should sew into, but just for the top, because when you sometimes get these stuffed, it's kind of hard to tell where exactly that row was or should be. And I can already tell with this guy, like, I don't think I did too bad with the head fin. It curls a little bit on the neck, but I think it should have been, well, that was the one thing with that. I think it was supposed to be up higher, but I couldn't really tell because it didn't tell me to place a stitch marker, so I would know later. But his back fin is totally slanted. So I think it's only like 2 stitches off, so it's not terrible, but I can tell. And then this guy, I stuffed him with all my bad fiber pieces of my spinning project. That was kind of a fail, but this was the fiber that I wasted trying to learn how to use my new spinning wheel. And I finally learned that I needed to kind of self-twist it when I needed to reconnect things. So that's why I had so much fuzzies. And I'm like, this will be enough fiber. Actually, I still have some left over. But yeah, that fiber is perfectly good in this because it's not really going to be used for anything much more than my kids toting it around. And it'll probably smell sheepy if we wash him, but he's also not very big, so he should fairly well dry out too. Might just take some extra time. Anyways, that's my big FO for the week, my finished object. So let's see, what else will we discuss? I guess we'll go ahead and talk about, I did do this little hat. I actually don't know where I stuck him, so I can't give you a little more detail about it, other than I believe the main color is done in I Love This Yarn, and this is just leftover yarn that I have, so I'm not 100% on that, but I'm pretty sure that that's what it is. And then the little, I think it's a gray stripe. Please forgive me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to go with what my kids told me. I think it's a gray stripe, and this is a pattern, I think it originally came from a book, but it's just a basic self-knowledge beanie of going around. I think it's probably somewhere around 48 stitches wide and done in half double crochets. And then you just kind of, I think the pattern that I originally read used 10 rows of the going just straight around and around and around after your increases. So yeah, it's a fairly simple hat. I actually did this for a new crochet along that I found. It's probably knit or crochet along. I'm sure it was a knit along, and I'm not sure if they specified that you could crochet or if I asked, but it's a different hat theme each month, so it'll run all year. But the month of March was baby hats because the podcast host was expecting, I hope, that she has had him by now. I do believe it was a boy. I won't swear 100% to that, but she was expecting, so, and I'm pretty sure she had a little update that said that he was on his way. So yeah, that little hat was for that one. I need to make a lacy hat for this month, and I just don't know if I'm going to get around to it or not. It can be out of any weight of yarn, so it doesn't have to be like a lace weight hat. It just needs to be, open air stitching, which isn't really a hard thing for me to do. I wish I would have known of this crochet along back in February, or at least the lace month could have been February, because I totally did baby hats in February, and I totally made a lace hat in February, whereas I have made no hats in the month of April so far. Anyways, well, since we're on a hat kick, we'll go ahead and talk about my lace hat that I made back in the month of February. This was for the Land of Camelids. I actually made this hat out of a pattern I designed myself, but it is basically taking the stitches from the Hermione's shell mittens, which is a fingerless glove pattern on Ravelry. And I'm not going to remember the designer for that, but again, this stuff is all linked in my project pages, so you can find it there. I think I went and increased it till I got to 100 or 100-ish stitches. I made it for myself, based around my head size, and I do have a small head, so, I just basically did that until I got to as many stitches as I would need to work the shell pattern evenly, and that shell pattern uses, I believe it's a free pattern, so I think I can basically go into the fact that it uses a shell stitch and a V-stitch alternating, and then you work your shell stitches into the V-stitches in the next row. So I just needed to have, and I'm not going to remember how many stitches, but I needed that specific number so that it came out even, and I just kind of went around and around until I was comfortable with where it ended, and then I just kind of finished that off. So I kind of made my own Hermione shell pattern, but I made it into a hat to go with my fingerless gloves. that I made I needed a 50-gram project for the Land of Camelids, so I made this hat to match the gloves so that I could count it as one project. And this set in total took exactly pretty much that 50 grams. It's probably a little tiny bit under that because I am not very good at using alpaca fingering weight yarn. It's a alpaca merino blend. And I had to frog a couple things a couple times, and that kind of cost me probably a few yards of actual yarn, because alpaca yarn is in general, alpaca is a halo-y yarn, so it's just kind of fuzzy, and that makes it so, even though it's supposed to have really good stitch definition, so it's just harder, I think, to frog, because you have to pull all those little kind of halo-y fibers back through that stitch, and it doesn't want to do that for you. So yeah, those are technically, well, I'll go ahead and talk about the fingerless mitts. Like I said, this is the Hermione's Shell Mittens fingerless mitts. They have a couple different directions for length, and pretty much it's just repeating a certain amount. I actually decided to do something in between the two sizes that it said. I do have small hands, and I didn't like where the short size of it ended up on my hand, so I went ahead and did something in between because I didn't need a long hand either. But otherwise, I think I basically worked it as written. I had some trouble in figuring out some of the thumb issues, and it does have like an actual thumbed section. It's not just an open hole for your thumb. Lots of people told me to go ahead and just leave the thumb off of it, and I think if I made these later to resell, I probably would leave the thumb off because it's just not as easy, and I don't think it adds a lot to the actual look of the mitten, but it does add a lot to the warmth on the thumb. So for me, I know what it was. I wanted them to go up higher on my fingers versus down farther on my actual arm. So I made the actual hand a bit longer, and so I made the thumb probably a little bit longer too, just so that I would have more coverage on my actual hand. But again, I made this more for myself than as something for anyone else, and it was all made for the Land of Camelids project, which is in the Yarn to Table podcast. And I think that's all I'm going to share with you today so that I can get this uploaded and kind of edited, since today is one of the boys will be going over to my husband's dad's for the night, and then we'll probably have to go pick him up tomorrow. I'm not sure. A lot of times now they just bring him back because that's easier on their schedule because they're not waiting on us, and it's easier for us because the weekends are the only times that we can actually get some stuff done. Anyways, I'm not exactly sure what we'll be covering tomorrow. We'll talk to you later, guys.